Okay, can you hear me now? Hello.
Yeah, that's better.
Okay, that's better. Thank you so much. So I'm welcoming everybody on board as we start our meeting. I want to give this opportunity to Paul to give us the way forward as the African Environmental Network Coordinator. And then he's going to welcome Dr. David. And then from there, we shall have our first speaker as from 420. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Linux, to give me the floor. Hello, everyone. Nice to see you all. It's a pleasure for me to be here with you guys. And this is the first event of the year on, especially on climate justice. Welcome in this first regional workshop facilitated by African Environmental Network and Solve Climate by 2030. Which is a project hosted by the Bat University and Open University Network. I'm Paul Audrey Dokmo. I'm the coordinator of African Environmental Network, and I'm joining from Cameroon. It's a pleasure for me to be here. You know, African Environmental Network is a regional organization. And our mission is to contribute to the management of environmental risks while ensuring the restoration of the environment and its preservation, of course, for a better living environment of ecosystems and a positive improvement of the provision of ecosystem services. So to do this, we carry out project development, research, training, advocacy, awareness, and communication and environmental communication. So our main objective is to contribute to the management of environmental risk and ensure the restoration of the environment for a better living environment of ecosystem and an improvement of an improvement in the provision of ecosystem services. So why saying this? If you want to know more about African Environmental Network, you can reach out to us directly by email or visit our website. Welcome once more. I just want to thank all of you guys for being there with us, and may the Almighty God will gather us today be in charge to be the lead of this regional workshop, and wish us a successful regional workshop. I hope that you will learn more and improve also your knowledge about climate justice, about energy, renewable energy, about how you can work with your communities on ground. So I don't want to take more of your time. So enjoy your workshop. Let's enjoy our workshop, and thank you once more. Thanks, Lennox. Give it back to you.
Thank you so much. I have seen someone I know, the chat, Dr. Gavi from Masindamli, who is a lecturer I know. Welcome so much, Dr. Gavi. At this point, I want to welcome Dr. David Blockstein to talk about solving climate by 2030. Dr. David is the co-director of the African Environmental Network. Welcome. Thank you.
I think I'm the co-director of the Worldwide Climate and Justice Education Week, but maybe I'm getting a promotion to be co-director with Paul, but thank you. So it is a real delight for me to be with you today and to let you know that this Africa Regional webinar event is part of a global project. There are more than 300 different organizations participating, maybe 200 events, over nearly 300 classes, teachers that are teaching about climate justice and education at this time. And I will thank and acknowledge my colleague, Carrie Ann Canfield, who is providing the technical support for us today and is getting up very early from their time in Chicago. So Carrie Ann, if you would please be so kind as to show our introductory and welcoming video.
It can take air out of my little brother's lungs.
What if it submerges my Bangladeshi land of love, magic, stories, and songs?
I'm afraid my hands can do nothing to stop the downpour.
I'm afraid it will leave us alone in a world of concrete and plastic.
Groom Gaia into a vacant void.
It will take the green and leave us in the dark.
I'm afraid it will bring out the worst in people.
Uprooting our families and communities.
Leaving our children to an irreversible nightmare.
Taking the beauty of each season from us.
Causing untold suffering that could have been prevented.
I am afraid.
I'm afraid.
I'm afraid.
I'm afraid.
I'm afraid.
Economics.
So I will just add to that as we collectively work to change the world and to change from fear to hope, that it's organizations like Africa Environmental Network and your partner organizations that are working with obviously very difficult circumstances in challenging situations, but doing amazing work. And it over the past few years and working on this project, I've been especially inspired by the organizations of Africans, generally younger people, and the leadership that you have all provided. And so I want to thank you all, not only for being here today, but for the important work that each of you is doing individually and collectively. So thank you very much for being with us, and I'll turn it back to you, Paul and Lennox. You want to go ahead, Paul, and unmute and.
Okay, thank you very much. Now okay, Linux, yeah.
Hello, Paul, you can continue, please.
Oh, okay, thank you very much. Now we will welcome our first speaker, which is Dr. Zimwe Regina, and she is in charge of educational partnership innovation in communities as the regional coordinator here in Africa. So, Dr. Regina.
Yes, Paul.
Yeah, you have the floor. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from the world. It's a privilege to join this beautiful forum. And today, as introduced, I am the EPIC Africa Regional Coordinator. And EPIC stands for Empowering Communities, Education Partnerships for innovation in communities. So there are keywords there, education, that speaks very well to the theme of this conference and the Education Week. Partnerships, which are very essential, especially if we're going to be addressing environmental justice. Innovation, I know that a lot of people here innovative, some are youthful, and so it's about harnessing innovation, technologies, approaches that help us for environmental justice and resilience, and then communities, which is quite key if we are to really achieve some of the tenets of justice that have to do with equity, equality, inclusivity, and so forth and so on. So just to take us through my session outline today, there's a bit of an introduction, the objectives. I hope that by the end of this presentation, all of us will have an appreciation of the EPIC model, as well as some of the work that we are doing. So I will present on the network as well as the model very briefly. And then we'll describe some of the projects we are doing across Africa. That's my region, although I'll touch a little bit on the other regions. And then begin to see how we Fawad, do you mind keeping your mic muted? Thank you. So we're describing the partnerships at a global scale and some of the future plans identified, and then hopefully we can have a question and answer session. So to start us off, I just want to present a very brief overview of the EPIC network. Again, to reiterate, is the Education Partnerships for Innovation in Communities network. And I'll come back after this overview just to touch on how that links up with environmental justice and resilience. So the EPIC network was started just over 10 years ago in the US, where it's been operating. There are over 70 university and local government partnerships, and I'll explain how that works. And there are over 300 programs currently. In the past 5 years, there's been efforts to internationalize the network and to use the model. So regions such as Africa, Southeast Asia, the Latin America and the Caribbean have been roped in, and we are hoping to expand to other areas such as Europe and Australia as we go. And what is so unique about EPIC? I know a lot of us work within the education sector, we work with communities, and we might even be looking at innovations and technologies and so forth. But the uniqueness of EPIC is that we are here to support the partnership part, which, as I will explain, sometimes is not really present in partnerships, in quotes. So what is the EPIC network? As explained, this is a global network. Anyone can be part of the network. It does look at a three-way partnership. We work with universities, we work with local governments or authorities. In some parts of the world, we call these municipalities. And then the last partner is communities. And I'll break communities down a little bit. There's a lot of debate across the regions as to what communities means. Communities simply means a grouping of people. So these can be indigenous people, local communities within a certain geographical area. It could be partners such as banks, investors, civil society, as long as they form what you would loosely term a community. So it doesn't matter where you are in the world, you are able to join the EPIC partnership.
I get you a number.
And we start off by asking a very simple question, although this has proven to be quite radical, and it's to talk about the existence of resources. First of all, we ask ourselves on the greenish part, if you can see my screen, what if we could connect existing And you can see that we've put existing in bold there just to emphasize. What if we could connect existing university instructors or lecturers or researchers with existing courses and with existing local projects? And what if we could then have all this hodgepodge, put that together and bring them at a scaled magnitude that brings value for all? So EPIC is about bringing together existing resources and being able to have a win-win solution. So we are about improving social economic conditions, and that's where the climate justice or environmental justice comes in, because it's about making sure that the different partners benefit and we have access and beneficiation, which are all very important when it comes to justice. And so let's talk about the tenets of the EPIC model. And there are 5 of them. So like I said before, the first element talks about respecting existing administrative structures, as well as individual responsibility and having incentives on all sides. And I'll underline their respect as a key word. Also existing as a key word, and incentives on all sides as a key word. As you know, when it comes to environmental justice, we're really talking about making sure that those in a particular locality are able to access resources, whether they're environmental resources, natural resources, in a way that is beneficial economically, socially, spiritually. As you know, environmental resources, bioresources, ecosystem resources can come in the form of spiritual, social, economic aspects. So it's about looking at those resources, looking at existing administrative structures, because we have found that there is no need to reinvent the wheel, but to just try and make it as efficient as possible. We also, on the city side or local administrative side, which could be local authorities, in some parts of the world that are not urban, these are rural authorities, traditional authorities. So we respect and look at existing projects, their priorities, as well as existing university courses. And then we try to match these to the ground in terms of the environmental issues that are being faced. A second element that comes, if anyone would like to join the EPIC network, is that whatever partnership comes through with the local government has to be genuine. And as you know, partnerships and working relationships can take time. So we are beginning to find that where there are formal agreements between partners, where there's some sort of accountability, this seems to work on both sides. This, again, can apply across the board, not just for EPIC. Whenever we are doing environmental justice work, working in education, formal agreements tend to be helpful in making partners accountable, and also in evaluating any impact or progress. And then we find that within that framework of a genuine partnership, there comes investment and ownership from both sides. So sometimes a lot of people ask about funding and say, you know, that is a problem. We have an environmental problem. We are trying to make sure that those affected are justified in that the issue does not continue making them vulnerable, or that they can at least benefit from some of the projects and the solutions proffered. So sometimes it's not about funding in monetary terms. It can be about time. It can be about knowledge and availing yourselves. And some of the examples I will give will show us this. A third tenet of the EPIC model is that really, at the end of the day, we want to improve the quality of life. So that talks about building resilience, making sure there's progress, economic conditions are improved, environmental health, and so forth and so on. This is mostly at community level. And then the fourth one, we always emphasize the fact that these projects or work should be community identified, community driven, and then finally community evaluated. A lot of people talk about working with communities, But most of the time, as underlined in that second bullet, they're just working for or in communities, but not necessarily with communities. So if you are to be part of the EPIC network, we emphasize the fact that the community has to be engaged right from the beginning and not as some sort of tokenism. And we find this as a problem. I'm sure most of you are involved in environmental justice who understand that a lot of the projects, a lot of the funding, a lot of the directives talk about community-based work, but the incentives and the benefits and even the funding is very tokenistic. And then the last element is because we work with universities or higher education institutions, is that the EPIC model catalyzes or emphasizes on scale. So it's not about one individuals, it's not about particular students or instructors, but it's really about bringing in a holistic solution. So different disciplines, large numbers of students, and then hours. So whatever work is done under the EPIC project has to be credited as part of the students' curriculum and courses. So we talk about a transdisciplinary approach where we are beginning to see that the issues to do with our environment on the ground are very complex. There are so many factors that affect them. So you'll find that the solutions come in as a holistic approach. So it's not just one discipline. For example, if you have flooding in a city, it's not just maybe the weather, Met Climate Services. It might even need social scientists to talk to communities. It might need finance to address that. It might need investment in insurance and so forth. So you find that many disciplines become involved, and it's very important for us to foster them working together. And normally this crosses academic years. And I just finished this part with a quote from one of the professors at the University of Namibia, which is part of our network. And he says that the model is about connecting. So like I said, universities, cities, but more importantly, being relevant to communities. So I think that's in emphasis. And on his part, remember we talked about evaluations and improving the quality of life. As an academic, he found that EPIC helped him reflect about making his teaching more relevant to society, helping students understand societal applications of what they are learning. And he also liked this idea of using existing resources. And then another person who was part of our training, she came from the Ministry of Environment in Kinshasa, DRC. I see there are a few people joining us from the DRC. And she says, normally as a ministry, they have visions, they have programs, and they have challenges. But what the EPIC model and the training did for her was to begin to expand their thinking around using existing resources to reach their vision. And that should be able to take this back home, particularly for communities that are impacted by climate change. So like I said, the EPIC network is global, but I'll talk a little bit about the African network, as most of us are from the region, and this is what I coordinate. Currently, we have these cities that are involved. These are the ones that are active. Some have been members before, some are aspiring, and we're growing the network. So from wherever you are in the continent, you can be part of our network. We do conduct training sessions, and you'll find that most of the work traverses sectors, but a lot of things are quite cross-cutting. And then I'll talk about a few examples. I've just named there a few cities: Durban, Lusaka, Nairobi. Those first three were the forerunners. As the EPIC Africa Network grew, they were the ones who started their projects. Some of their work is in the pictures. And then we've had cities like Mombasa, Bukavu, and Ginger City in Uganda. And all of those describe the different programs they've done. So in Durban, it's been about managing rivers and solid waste. In Lusaka, it's been about waste management, but also looking at sustainability in terms of zoning and local area plans. Nairobi was interesting in that they tried to make sure that they improved walkability in the city and in the market. And then Mombasa produced a sanitizer solution during COVID. Bukavu, there were workshops to do with waste again. And then Ginger City along the shores of Lake Victoria, I beg your pardon, traffic and waste management and so forth. So let me start off with how the EPIC Africa was launched. Like I said, in 2017, there have been trainings and partnerships. Nairobi, Durban, and Lusaka were the first ones, and those are some of the projects that they did, and I already explained a few of them, and I will go in depth. So starting off, after 2017, we then had some partners join us, including START International, and then we had a few regional training events. I just want to emphasize that we often talk about our work in regional and international conferences, such as the Sustainability Research and Innovation Conference. EPIC also holds an annual conference every year, and we have partners such as Thriving Earth Exchange, which are also quite relevant when it comes to networks such as this one. So in Durban, what the partnership did, it was working with the University of KwaZulu-Natal. Some of you may be familiar with that university. And this was under the Built Environment and Development Studies. They were working in an informal settlement called Quarry Road, which is settled along the banks of a river. And the city always had issues working with these informal settlements, as you can imagine. Durban faces a chronic flooding issue, and the floods are becoming more and more frequent. So what the EPIC students have been able to do there is to go into the community, begin to work with the community. They were able to draft a disaster management plan. They also assisted the community in awareness and understanding of the flood. The students gained because they have on-the-ground knowledge about community engagement, and then the community also benefited in that. For the first time, they were justified, if I may call it that, in that for the first time ever after the EPIC project, the city was able to go in and begin to collect waste from their area. They also reduced the impact of flooding by restoring the river ecosystem, making sure that waste was not dumped. They also embarked into projects such as recycling and making products such as briquettes from some of the plastic waste and some of the waste that is recyclable. So there was a bit of stormwater management engineering there, and some of the challenges that they faced. And then now they are planning to then expand this work. From that one community, the following EPIC project, they were able to look at 6 informal settlements. This is what they did. And now they want to expand the work beyond Durban, but to the greater Durban municipality area. So we're beginning to see impact and scaling up. Another city that some of you may be familiar with, again in Southern Africa, is Lusaka. And they developed local area water plans, again, working in some informal settlements that were not mapped or planned for. And what they did is, by working with the University of Zambia and these students within the EPIC project, they were able to save 75% of the fees that the city would have paid a consultant to do these plans. But they were able to help the community in climate change adaptation, in waste management, and in urban planning. So that map shows some of the planning, and they use GIS and so forth, and other tools. And look at that. They were looking at roping in 20 departments as well from the university. 9 departments from the Lusaka City Council. And currently, they are targeting over 500 students. And those are some of the different departments: geography, urban planning, developmental studies, etc., that they plan to work with. So this is quite important. And then we have another informal settlement called Mbale City in Uganda. It's near, not Makerere, Kampala, the capital city. But here again, they were facing a solid waste chronic issues. And you know, with waste, it does a lot of damage to the environment, to the soil, to the air quality to some extent. You're looking at aesthetics, odor, health implications, and so forth. So the city had challenges around valuing the payment of waste collection services. And the EPIC students were able to go into the community, collect data to do with mapping the waste. So they were able to then categorize the waste. They were able to sort the waste, and they were able to offer solutions where the partnership was strengthened between the university, Makerere University, Mbale City Council, and a community-based organization called Slum Dwellers Federation. So the next step here is to then begin to see how best they can all partner to make sure that the waste is managed safely and in a way that makes sure that the city is kept clean and in a sustainable manner. And then I think the last one, second last, is Western Liberia. This is quite interesting. It looks at a lake, Piso, which is in Western Liberia. And here you find that there was a lot of ecosystem degradation and mangroves, which are quite important when it comes not only to conservation, but to do with local livelihoods was being degraded. So they used a nature-based approach to enhance biodiversity, to reduce the impact of climate change, and working with the community. So those are all core benefits. The students were able to evaluate the success of these conservation actions through a multi-objective studies. They also worked with the community around changing their behavior regarding using mangrove wood to smoke fish. That was, you know, one of the issues. They also mapped the mangrove degradation, which was not done before. And they are continuing with this work to cover a much larger area, again, working with the local government, non-governmental organization, and conservation organizations in this area. Harare, they are looking at addressing deteriorating environmental conditions through technologies such as phytoremediation, and a lot of training material has been developed. So they want to work with communities almost as citizen science, where they will be able to monitor conditions of deteriorating rivers. And then they begin these awareness campaigns and also contribute towards sustainable municipality growth. So again, like the other cities, they're looking at environmental degradation, pollution, which has reached a high in this city because the particular rivers in question are now hyper-eutrophic, some of the highest pollution ever recorded in the region and in rivers. And then, of course, another cross-cutting issue we keep seeing in the cities is the solid waste disposal issue, and then implied waterborne diseases and vectors. So the partnership is between the city council and a university called Chinoi, and they are identifying the environmental challenges, which of course include climate change. So here they are trying to make sure that they rope in the community, because the local council has been trying to address these problems for over 30 years, and they've not been able to come up with a sustainable solution. So the only way is to make sure that those communities that live around these areas are included, they are engaged, they have ownership in making sure that they manage the waste, they manage the ecosystems and the rivers, and that they also see benefit coming to them. And then we have Mombasa. Mombasa addressed during COVID solid waste management. They used their EPIC model to produce a non-alcohol sanitizer solution and sanitizing booths, which then made sure that communities that were coming from a particular island were able to pass through safely, and that they also changed their personal waste management habits, and they also looked at recycling. So again, I think a cross-cutting theme that we can see here is the fact that when the community comes in and they see benefits, they do want solutions to these issues to do with ecosystem degradation, to do with waste management. And as soon as the EPIC students come in and they are engaging them, and we have this bottom-up approach, we've seen great success. So this EPIC work is continuing. And in fact, next week, if anyone is from Mombasa, we are going to be in that city and we can meet up. And then lastly, we have an example of the city of Gaborone, the capital city of Botswana, where the local council is partnering with students from the University of Botswana, again, looking at waste management. And they are looking at the largest waste dump in the city, which has implications to do with the effluent and the quality of the effluent and the water. They have been able to identify things like pesticides, things like carcinogenic components in the water and in the effluent as far as 10 kilometers from this landfill. So again, students from different departments, chemistry, biology, environmental science, health are coming together to really look at solutions of how some of the wastewater and the water can be used and conserved. Botswana is generally a very dry country, so water conservation is very key there. So this is that was my last slide. I hope I'm still within time, and anyone can join our network. That's some of the information or contact information that can be used. And I'll stop here and hand it over to Paul, perhaps for some question and answers. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Regina. What an amazing presentation. First of all, I would like to thank EPIC, represented here by the African coordinator of the EPIC network, which is you, Dr. Regina. So, well, what an amazing work you are doing here in Africa. Not only in Africa, but in the worldwide, due to the fact that EPIC is a global network. Of course, dear participant, you may have questions, but please allow us to move first forward because we are going to have a Q&A session no later than after the next speaker. Why saying this? We have two speakers we were unable to connect today, but they record their video, and we will play it back here with you. So the first speaker who was unable to connect with us is Dr. Daniel Kamen. He's a director of a renewable and Great Energy Laboratory in the University of California. So we're going to play the record of Dr. Daniel. Yeah. Okay, there we go.
Hello. Thank you for having me on. And I wish you all the best in the meeting. I wish I could be there in person. Asante sana na karibuni. So I'm Dan Kamen. I'm a professor and chair of the Energy and Resources Group at the University of California, Berkeley, where I direct the Renewable and Appropriate Energy Laboratory. And previously, I've served as Senior Advisor for Energy and Innovation at the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID. I've also served in the Obama administration as Science Envoy in the Department of State. I'm going to give you an overview of one particular approach to Africa's energy transition, not the big picture story about decarbonizing energy, but a more specific piece that ties together these issues of development, justice via reducing inequalities. Any of the material I'll talk about today, you can directly access from my website, and you can see here at the top of the screen. And also, if you use Twitter or X at Dan_Kamen, and these are just places to find some opportunities to look at more of the materials we have here. All of us know that our effort to reach our climate goals of reducing emissions by 90 to 95% by 2050, that would limit warming to roughly 1.8 or maybe even 1.5 degrees. The goal that the international community has set, everyone knows those goals are far away in the sense of not far away in time, but we are not close to achieving them. And you can see here, the path we're on is a small down payment of what we all know we need to protect the planet. And frequently that story gets told in the context of industrialized nations, Europe, US, East Asia, should meet these goals, but other countries should not. I'm going to argue the reverse. I'm going to argue that, in fact, meeting these goals, country by country, is in fact the best way to ensure local economic growth. This is not a question of the West or the North should go first, poor countries should go second. Everyone who does not move ahead together will lose out in different ways. We all lose in terms of the planet, but since the rich countries have contributed the vast majority of historic emissions, maybe it's time for poorer countries to follow a similar path. I think that's wrong, but I know that's controversial. When we talk about pathways to development, what we're really talking about is we're not on pathways to meet our sustainable development goals, let alone our climate goals. Of the 17 sustainable development goals, from universal energy access to clean water, to gender equality in education, to protecting the land, ocean, providing healthcare, we're on track to meet those 2030 goals for a tiny fraction. Most are not on track or are going backwards. If we dig in more detail, we can see from your favorite SDG that very few of them are there. My own topic is SDG 7, universal energy access, and SDG 3, universal healthcare. These are both far from meeting targets. In fact, as we think about this is not a story of North versus South, East, West, different ethnicities. This is a story of financial inequality that I admit correlates with skin color. When we look at the richest 10% of the world's population, majority people in Europe and in North America, with growing fractions now in China and elsewhere, we see that over half of global emissions come from the richest 10%, the richest 1% or 15% of emissions, and the poorest half of the planet, where much of Africa still resides, are contributing less than 7%. So why isn't this a story where the rich should go first, make the cuts, make technology cheaper, and pass on a better world? They should, but I am quite confident they will not. That means we're all in this together. And that's why in this talk, I will briefly outline how I believe starting with SDG 7, hitting poverty goals, hunger goals, healthcare goals, gender equity goals, all spiral out from a focus on using clean energy to serve the most underserved. And I say that as someone who at the University of California, Berkeley, is the co-director of our Center on Environmental and Climate Justice, and also someone who has served in the Biden, the Obama, and before that, the Clinton administrations. When we think about why we should put Africa first, yes, it's in part because Africa receives a tiny fraction of climate finance, but everyone knows international aid dollars are not going to win the war on climate or poverty, that we must do things at home. It's also not because Africa will be the second most populous continent by 2100. That is true. but it's really because Africa is such a large part of our global shared resource. And while I don't think that the US or China or Europe should dictate what happens in Africa, I think that for Africa's own development, the opportunities to do things right must begin with a transition to clean energy in ways that are not just about building big new solar and wind facilities. In fact, the biggest change we've seen over the last 2 decades is the so-called learning curve, where the price of clean energy has fallen dramatically, so much so that in 1978, now quite a long time ago, 5 decades, solar power was the most expensive. Now it's the least expensive. And even for countries that have huge fossil fuel reserves, that includes Saudi Arabia, that includes the United States, that includes Nigeria, that includes many countries that are or could be members of OPEC. In fact, clean energy is cheaper and it's socially far more desirable. The so-called cost curve, where the cost declines linearly in log-log space, a power law, as we decrease the price or increase the volume, we see the cost goes down proportionally, and that's what the slope of this line shows here. That's an amazing development, and that means that wind and solar and energy storage and other technologies that we can mass produce have come down dramatically in cost, dramatically quickly. As we think about that, it now is cheaper in much of the world to build, to pay for CapEx, a new renewable energy plant, than it is to simply operate an existing fossil plant. It also means that as we think about a world where we have dirty facilities powering everything from hospitals to schools to industry, we can be moving to a world of clean energy dramatically quickly. In this case, I've shown pictures of power plants from the dirty coal-fired one on the left to diesel to the solar-powered ones on the right, not at any facility, but I'm going to focus the rest of this talk on health facilities, hospitals and clinics. UNDP, UNICEF, UNITAR, but also facilities directed around health, Gavi, the global vaccine efforts. Many companies, Caterpillar and Engie and Vodafone, governments like the government of the United States and of Denmark and others, as well as a number of research university groups. My own team at the University of California, Berkeley is here, RAIL, and a team at the Arizona State University are here. These have all partnered to focus on something called HEDA, Health, Electrification, Telecommunication Alliance, sometimes called Powering Healthcare. In fact, as we look at this, the goal set forth by this alliance is to electrify 10,000 health facilities by the end of next year. We are ahead of schedule to get there. And ultimately, our goal is to electrify 100,000 health clinics across Africa. 100,000 is the number of facilities that currently we believe do not have any power or affordable power or reliable power. As we look ahead, what that means is we must engage in meetings and dialogue. We must plan out clean energy infrastructure to be installed at clinics. We must think about how we can back this up with information and knowledge systems and training. And we must think about how this impacts not only healthcare, but also the opportunity space for health workers and others that are engaged in this area. That is what HEDA is all about. In fact, the 100,000 health facilities without power, you can see them here in these blue dots. The black lines are the grid. So the bulk of health facilities in Africa are off-grid or underserved by the grid. And we estimate that $5 billion will be required to do that. That sounds like a lot, but we've already raised almost $2.5 billion. So I believe we have the financial story, we have the technical story, and we have a unique opportunity to not only power healthcare to meet SDG 3, but more critically, we have an ability to overbuild energy system so that these health facilities become the hubs of mini grids around the continent. Already we have 11 countries that are HEDA partners or are considering it, from some of the early those to join, including Tanzania and Eswatini and Malawi, Nigeria, Sierra Leone, but also others that are considering it. Kenya, we hope to have a major announcement next month. In terms of a timeline, more than 1,790 clinics have already received packages of solar and instrumentation, some large, some very small, like the one you see here, installed by a company called Off Grid Box that's based in Boston, based in Rome, and based in Kigali, Rwanda, installing packaged solution systems to meet many of these needs. Here is an example of a clinic electrified in Eswatini. This is a larger facility. You can see the clinic in the back. They have their own trucks. They have high-tech telecommunications for patient records, telemedicine. They also have solar systems in place. This is the flagship. This is what we hope to see done everywhere, utilizing the $2.5 billion we have today, but ultimately the $5 billion we hope to raise with your help by the end of this decade. In fact, as we go forward, many of the technical issues are ones we're already working on. In many cases, it's not just about installing solar and batteries and recording the outcome of patients. It's also about designing hardware so that we can track voltage and frequency issues at clinics around the continent. Here is a company that exists here at Berkeley. They make a small, very low-cost sensor. This is a company called Nline. There's their website. And these are plugged in behind devices, refrigerators like you see here, freezers, oxygen generators, baby warmers, centrifuge machines, so that we can track power interruptions, voltage spikes, frequency issues. We can upload the data over the web or by cell phones to track and only pay for health facilities that are working and are working well. In fact, we have a great deal of data now on that first 1,790 clinics. Here we have wild variations in voltage from 180 volts, spiking almost 300, coming down under 100. As anyone who works with any electronics knows, this will short out your equipment. This will destroy medical equipment. It makes no sense to install better quality refrigerators and freezers if we don't stabilize voltages. Here we have an example of the powerhouse for the city of Goma. Before, with these huge frequency and voltage variations, and then after we installed what is now Africa's largest mini grid. And here we have very flat, stable voltage. You can see a little wave during the day as the amount of power drawn changes as we go from daytime use to nighttime. Again, we have lots of data, more than anyone who's not an electrical engineer will want to see, but this highlights the fact that we can in fact track, even in under-resourced situations. This is from North Kivu province in Democratic Republic of Congo. So we're gathering data, hours a day without power, number of interruptions, all the kind of things that an electrical engineer would love, but a healthcare facility worker might not care about, except to be asked, are my systems working well? We track clinics, we track power outages. In fact, some of these clinics with many, many outages per year, 500 outages per year, that's this metric called SAFE. This is a diesel clinic. Here at the far end, almost no outages. This is a solar-powered clinic. Solar is not only cheaper, but it can provide regular power as long as you build the right size solar system and have the right size battery. In fact, we're going beyond that. In a partnership in Kenya, here I am with the governor of Laikipia County, his chief of environment, his chief of energy, his chief of staff, the head medical conditioner, and the head of the United Nations Development Program's efforts in Kenya, the UN office that works on local development. We have set up a program that takes this idea of HEDA and adds ethnomedicine. We're calling that HEDA Plus. Here's a map of Kenya with all the health clinics. Here are the health clinics in Laikipia. There are 135 of them. Our partnership with UNDP, USAID, and now Safaricom and other providers is to electrify every one of these clinics, but not only to electrify clinics, to bring ethnomedicine, herbalist healers, traditional medicine, whatever you want to call it, as part of the team going forward, not as a witch doctor outsider. So in this effort, in partnership with John Kengasong, who is my liaison at the US government, along with environmental justice groups like a friend of mine, Ole Konga, working with the government of Laikipia. Here we see the same UN leader, Ms. Nancy Chege on the left, Hakeem Steiner He is the administrator of UNDP, myself, Anthony Ngorano, who is the country director for Kenya, all meeting at the Africa Climate Summit to agree to a partnership where USAID, represented by myself, UNDP, represented by the other three members here, signs an agreement to fund the pilot phase, phase one of this effort. Here is our workshop, just held in February in Laikipia, in the city of Nanyuki. Ethno-medicine leaders all come together. There I am in the middle next to the governor. Traditional healers, you can see here with traditional medicines. Here are participants looking at these traditional cures, and the question is, can we make Western or conventional medicine work together with ethno-medicine? I believe we can. This comes from training. This comes from efforts like the partnerships we see here. Here I am with the first daughter of Kenya, Charlene Ruto. Here she is speaking. Here is the minister, the deputy minister of health for Kenya, announcing last year at COP28, the climate summit in Dubai, that Kenya is committing to electrifying all health clinics by 2028. We want to bring this ethno-medicine piece so that the same high-tech facilities that we use to provide better laboratory services for conventional medicine can also be used to test compound quality and store them well in refrigerators and freezers, so that we can use these better lighting, better information, better Wi-Fi facilities at clinics to do additional training, so that we can do ethno-medicine with a technical twist to support it, not to replace it. And there are many synergies, from electric fencing that we're now seeing at some of these clinics, to efforts to have knowledge entry points in this program we call HEDA Plus, the plus for ethno-medicine, charging electric vehicles for harvesting, for planting, for bringing patients to clinics, and ultimately better record keeping and Wi-Fi services. All of these are parts of efforts to partner conventional medicine with traditional medicine. Here's a meeting outside of the ethno-medicine resource center in central Kenya. Leveraging and supporting traditional groups. This is a young mothers association in a minority community, the Yaku community in Laikipia County, and then again leading this back so that traditional ethno-medicine dispensaries can be allies and not enemies of Western medicine. Here are certificates being awarded to people who take ethno-medicine training courses, cultural courses. We believe these can work together, and we believe with your help, finding funders for this ethno-medicine or HEDA Plus project in Kenya, that we can reach every health clinic and country. We have the money for the pilot phase in hand, $500,000 US. We believe we will need more than 10 times that to reach all the health facilities. We hope to seek your ideas and your support to reach out to companies, governments that would wish to join such an effort, so that HEDA Plus can take place not only in Laikipia, but all across Africa. I want to thank you for this effort, and just put up at the end the contact information for myself, head of the university team, and for Nancy Chege, who runs the UNDP Global Environmental Facilities Small Grants Program. That's a mouthful, at the UN office. We want to work with you. Gina Cady is the overall coordinator of the HEDA project. I want to thank you for the time to present this. I hope you'll email me questions. I hope you'll email me suggestions of groups that might want to fund this effort. Asante sana. I hope you have a great conference, and I look forward to getting your feedback as we go later on. Thank you so much for this effort, and may we move ahead so that our next dialogue will be about not only making this happen locally, but also making happen the larger effort where we are able to leverage health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Daniel, for this amazing work. Ladies and gentlemen, dear participants, I hope that you have enjoyed the two first session like me. What a wonderful presentations filled with knowledge and experience. So I hope you receive a lot of knowledge and opportunities as well like me. And so said, surely you you have some questions or comments or any suggestions. So by saying this, I open the Q&A session for a maximum duration of 10 minutes, 10 minutes exactly. So if you have any question, just raise your hand or post or type your question in the chat box. In the chat box. I mean the question for the two first sessions. So the first sessions was led by Dr. Regina, and the second one was led by Dr. Daniel. Dr. Daniel. So as I was saying, unfortunately, Dr. Daniel was not available to join us online. So if you have any questions related to his presentation, don't hesitate to forward your question or to send your question by email us. Yeah. So we have the first hand up. Sorry if I made any mistake by pronouncing your name, please. We have Chedu Bem. Yeah, Godfrey. Yeah, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, sir. I really followed them closely with the first speaker, EPIC Network. So, and based on all her talk, I never heard anything concerning Nigeria. There wasn't any project that was cited Nigeria. There wasn't any form of reference about Nigeria. So I am trying to know how can EPIC Network be established in Nigeria, and how can Nigeria benefit from these projects that has been carried out in different parts of Africa with the exemption of Nigeria. So that is particularly if EPIC Network is established in Nigeria, I need to know who is coordinating it, how do I get involved, and then how do we go about it. So that is what I need to ask for. Then the other one is there a WhatsApp group, a Telegram group that we can belong to, so that we can benefit on these relevant topics that are being shared? Can we also have the records after the session? So these are some of the things I needed to point out. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah. Can I take a mic, sir?
Yeah, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. And
It's Awantu Christian from Cameroon.
okay. Nice to meet you, Christian.
Yeah, it's a wonderful opportunity to be here. I'm so glad. It's a wonderful discussion. And I can only say that we are hoping for more of such opportunities. The discussion is really interesting for those of us climate activists and climate enthusiasts. My question is I think, to Dr. Dan, the last presenter. You know, I've been personally always very curious as to why I have been treated many times by ethnomedicine, and sometimes with complications that conventional medicine could not handle. You know, but with much more cheaper treatment, I was treated of a few complications, and I've seen others treated from a lot more complicated illnesses. But we have always had this cold war between conventional medicine and ethnomedicine. So I just wanted to find out what really incited, what motivated, what pushed Dr. Dan and his team to think that ethnomedicine is no longer, or should no longer, be a rival or be treated as a rival to conventional medicine. Thank you so much. I really hope my question is clear enough.
Yeah, it's very clear. Thank you very much, Christian, for your question. And as I was saying, unfortunately, Dr. Dan is not with us there. And don't hesitate to send your question by mail. Yeah, you can email Dr. Daniel directly, or you can email us. Also, then Dr. Daniel will answer your question by email. For Godfrey, of course, we are going to share the records, the presentation in January. So now said, I will give the floor to Dr. Regina. Yeah, because you got very right question about the Nigeria chapter of EPIC. Thanks.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the interests. We have reached out to a couple of individuals that we know from Nigeria. Unfortunately, it has not led to the implementation of an EPIC project, but anyone is free to join our network. I've put in our contact information in the chat. The presentation is free to be shared. And what we normally do is to find entry points, or at least champions, people who are passionate about community-based work, and then we work with them. We normally want to do some training, so that takes resources and time and gathering people. And because we principally work with universities and local universities and community-based organizations, those are the kind of partners and stakeholders that we'll be looking for. So please feel free to get in touch with me, or use the email address info@epicn.org, and then we'll be able to get in touch with you. However, you can register and become a member. Anyone, any individual, it doesn't matter who you are, where you are, you can become a member, and you can access some of the resources from our website, epicn.org. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, we will take maybe the last question from Mangile Daniel. Yeah. Mangile Daniel.
Des unions, ça a été cette sensation que l'on cachait une information.
Yeah, Mangile Daniel, do you have any question? Okay, maybe it's a mistake. Godfrey, is it okay for you? Because I can just see your
okay. Hello.
Yeah, hi.
Okay, you want me? Sorry, you want me to take the floor? I don't know.
No, because you raise up to your hand, so there's a Q&A session. Yeah,
I still have another question.
I'm not getting you so well, huh? I don't know. As I have handed my hand, I don't know. So if I can intervene, say something.
Do you have any
Sorry,
question?
I'm first of all so late. Huh? I don't know. I'm so late. I've forgotten to be there at time, to take part at time. I'm sorry.
Okay, it's okay.
So,
I still have a question, sir.
Okay, please, Godfrey, let us.
May I say something? Ask my question? I don't know.
Yeah, Daniel, you have it.
Okay. My question is this one. I don't know if as I'm so late. When you are speaking of climate justice, climate justice, what do you think about population suffering from, let me see, from what we call in French, when there is so much sun, so that let's say there is no rain, and population suffer. Let's say population cannot go to their job for food. They cannot work in their farm because of no rain. How does your climate justice can, let's say, bring justice for those populations so that this the impact of no rain when they are working on the farm, what can be done so that those populations, let's say, may have justice, because that is a matter of climate justice. That's my first question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dan. Please, Dr. Regina, allow us to take the
I'm not so fluent in English. I'm just trying.
Thank you, Daniel. I'll take the question.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
All right. Yes, we are beginning to see multiple effects and impacts of climate change, and what you have described has to do a lot with heat waves or extreme heat conditions. And we're beginning to see impacts such as dehydration, which affects productivity. As the example you gave there of farm workers who will not be able to work in those conditions or even function in terms of walking to their workplaces. And there are a lot of power dynamics going on, Daniel, where we have our different levels of people who can, or interventions that can come in. So we have local interventions, starting off from personal level, where you can have things like a lot of rehydration, making sure that people are drinking water, making sure that they in places that are not as hot, and also making sure that they are served so that, you know, they help themselves, their households and their communities to cool down. And then in terms of justice, we do need interventions in those at that local level that can help individuals, communities, families begin to adapt and to try to mitigate, prevent some of those impacts. And within the climate health nexus, we are beginning to have some of the innovative solutions that, for example, Dr. David was showing us, where they have sustainable and clean energy sources that can help places like health facilities, clinics, and most of the times when we're talking about communities, you can have facilities where communities can begin to be helped if it's not possible to be able to offer these solutions at individual and household levels. I think everyone has really got a part to play in terms of trying to bring solutions to the table, because these issues are beginning to affect us all much faster than we are reacting and much faster than we are planning for. So we always advocate for climate resilience planning, and planning can be for the next day, month, year, years to come, and for the future when we're not even there. So because I come from a network that looks at communities, it's really about all of us rallying the community, the next person, our neighborhoods, so that we can effectively begin to look at how we can collaboratively try to help each other. And then at much higher levels, we're looking at community level, we're looking at national level. There are a lot of initiatives going on, particularly to do with national adaptation planning, And of course, that stems off from a much larger umbrella unit, the UNFCCC, that leads NAP and NDC, nationally determined contributions. And then, of course, like Dr. David says, there's a lot of politics going on where, you know, polluter and emitter is not really paying, and a lot of the finance within climate adaptation and mitigation is not trickling down to the very communities and people like you specified who are affected. So I think at the end of the day, I would say each of us has a part to play. If we can play much larger roles, like join communities, join other efforts, let's go for it. So those are some of the ways that I can offer. If governments can put in more effort so that we have livelihood options beyond livelihoods like farming that are severely affected by extreme climate events and climate variability, the better. If we can have technologies coming from all of us where those livelihoods can survive beyond the extremes and beyond the climate changes, the better for us. If we can diversify our services to, you know, financial, innovative investing sources, like we saw in Dr. David's presentation, I think the better for us, and the more we can help each other, including, you know, the most vulnerable, like the farmers you cited. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Regina. Please, Godfrey, allow us to move forward. We have Godfrey and Samuel. Please, can you type your question in the chat box so Dr. Regina could answer to both your questions directly on the chat box. Yeah. Please, we are running. You are running to our agenda items. Please, if you have any other questions, please do write them in the chat box, and we will provide answer. Yeah. By saying this, now we will move forward to our last two sessions. And our next speaker is Dr. Jennifer. Yeah. So, okay, welcome, Dr. Jennifer. The floor is yours. It's a pleasure for us to having you here. Yeah, to this regional workshop on climate justice and education. Yeah, the floor is yours. Thank you once more.
Thank you very much, Paul. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for inviting me today. I'll give a little bit of my background. I am a professor at Bard College in New York, and I work for the people who organize the worldwide Climate Week. And so I'm very pleased to be able to participate in this project. I teach graduate students at the Bard Center for Environmental Policy, and we teach both climate science and policy students and environmental policy students. So these are students doing a master's degree and that will go on to be policymakers. And what I'm going to present today, actually, I think will maybe help answer the last person who asked a question, contribute a little bit to answering his concerns about farming systems, because I'm going to focus primarily on how we think about making farming systems more resilient in the face of climate change. So what I'll cover today is, first I'll give a short review of the current predictions for climate change, in particular in Africa, focusing on the idea of extreme events. And then I think, as in the wonderful presentation we had by Professor Kahneman just now, I think I like to spend more of the time on opportunities and the positive part of the story, because I think it's not, even though the predictions are fairly dire, there's a lot of opportunity to meet the challenge in the way we, in particular, focus on food production. So as Dr. Kamen was saying, we're currently on track for this business as usual scenario. On the left, we can see that global carbon emissions at present, if we follow the sort of business as usual track, which is the red line here, that would lead to potentially 4 or even 5 degrees C change in temperature globally averaged by the year 2100. But there are opportunities, even though that's kind of the track we're on now. We really, there's definitely momentum building toward meeting one of these lower tracks where emissions are slowed down and the ultimate change in temperature won't be nearly so dire as that. Based on observations, there is definitely evidence accumulating that we have already begun to change the climate. And I'm focusing here, this is a kind of a funny image of the world with North America, South America, Europe, Africa, Asia, etc. And you can see that, in fact, based on the observations, there is definitely already an increase in what we call agricultural drought. In other words, drought that lasts for as long as a season in Africa. But interestingly, there's at the same time, we're seeing an increase in extreme rainfall events. So we can see here in the lower right-hand corner that the maximum daily precipitation, in other words, those extreme daily precip events have already begun to increase as well in Africa. So you can have, at the same time that we're seeing drought, we're also seeing at other times of the year extreme rainfall events. There's also evidence that crop yields have already begun to decline. This particular study was done by Sultan et al. For West Africa, focusing on millet and sorghum. And they showed both through observational data as well as simulation modeling that for West Africa as a whole, droughts have or crop yields for those two crops have declined by 10 to 15% during this first decade of the 21st century. So we know that we have a challenge before us. And the main lessons from the last 20 years of both observations and the simulation models is that extreme events are going to increase. So, you know, we often think, I think we used to think about climate change in terms of this kind of long, slow increase in global temperatures. But in fact, the hardest thing for farmers to face is when something unexpected happens and when we have an anomaly, a precip event or rainfall or a drought period that's far away from the long-term mean. And so in order to deal with that, we really need to think about resilience as an adaptation strategy. And our approach really over the 20th century in dealing with what we think of as resilience building in agriculture was all about applied technology from outside the system. So ramping up irrigation systems, adding more chemical fertilizers, using more herbicides and pesticides. But as we all know, we're running up against some limitations there, both in terms of degrading the system as a whole, and even when we're thinking about irrigation, if we become reliant on irrigation, then what happens when the aquifers run dry or the pond that we're pulling irrigation water from runs dry? So we really need to be thinking beyond that high input of external and often fossil fuel-based inputs to these systems to find resilient strategies. So the thinking that's really pretty widely adopted across the thinking around farming systems going forward is very much toward how do we use nature as a model for increasing resilience in farming systems? And in this figure to the right, one of the things that we notice, broadly without looking at the details, is that there's lots of biodiversity in this system. There's lots of different kinds of organisms, both above ground and below ground. And they are all playing roles in terms of how they're interacting with each other. And the more diversity we have in that system, the more the shocks to external shocks, such as climate shocks, tend to get smoothed out. So we now have a better understanding of this idea that the more the resilience is going to be built primarily on how much biodiversity is in our landscape. And we use this term multifunctional landscape. So we need to think about farming systems as playing numerous roles. And I'm in this very short talk I'm giving you today. I mean, I'll just mention I do a whole semester course on this topic in the program that I teach in. So today's going to be a real thumbnail sketch. But the two aspects of biodiversity I'm going to focus on that come from the ecology literature are functional diversity and response diversity. And by functional diversity, we really just mean different plants and animals are playing different roles in the system. Rather than thinking about it in terms of species by species, we're thinking about functional traits or the role that different organisms play in the system. Response diversity, on the other hand, is thinking about within one functional group, you might have a few different species that react very differently to climate shocks to help build resilience. So I'll go into each of these in a little bit more detail. So functional diversity provides provisioning, supporting, and regulating services. And that terminology comes from the way we think about ecosystem services, that provisioning usually means what's the actual product we're growing and getting out of the system. Supporting might be the way in which those the species diversity in the system are helping to complement each other or providing some other role. And then regulation might be something like nutrient cycling or carbon cycling. An example that I like to use comes from Native American traditional farming systems that's called the Three Sisters. And that is referring to three different plants that are traditionally grown together. So maize is in the middle. Maize is providing, of course, provisioning food for humans to eat, but it's also providing the structure for the beans to grow up. Then beans are in here, and the beans are providing a role of nitrogen fixation in the system, so that the beans are providing nitrogen for the other two plants. And then squash, and the squash is, of course, providing food, but it's also covering the surface of the soil, suppressing weeds, keeping the soil surface cool, and providing a little bit of habitat for other organisms on there. So the three different species they're all providing food for us, but they're also helping each other out. So it's the diversity there that adds up to being more than the sum of the three parts. In one of the prominent recent trends in farming systems that, of course, is drawn on traditional farming systems, but also is really being enhanced by some of the research that's going on coming out of the Center for Agroforestry, is to think about fast-growing nitrogen-fixing trees in with our annual crops in an alley cropping kind of system. So the trees are providing fuel wood for us, potentially livestock fodder that we can lop the leaves off of those plants. They're also usually, if we're using a nitrogen fixing tree, they're providing nitrogen for the other plants in the system, helping to build soil. That structural diversity is giving us sort of physical protection from wind. It keeps the system from drying out so quickly, giving us these habitat for birds to live in potentially, and even beneficial insects. And then it's the ecological interactions between all of the plants in the system that are really helping each other out, like the Three Sisters example. So the main idea that we're trying to promote here is this idea that if we can, but through increasing the biodiversity in the system, we're adding to the ability for the system itself to provide these ecosystem services rather than having to rely on external inputs to get these services. So one of the classic examples is pest control by providing beneficial insects in the system, providing a habitat for beneficial insects to be maintained. And there's been lots and lots of recent research trying to understand how that complexity, how do we support those systems through increasing the biodiversity in a system. In the little example picture I have here on the right, we have a system where birds can live, and the birds are helping to maintain or to reduce some of the bugs that are eating our crops. We also have a system where the natural enemies are the predatory bugs are helping to keep down the herbivores that are in the system. But those top predators are also eating the natural enemies. So if we keep a balance and many organisms in the system, the more, if there is a shock to the system in terms of a climate extreme, some of those organisms are going to do well and be able to continue to provide those services. A good example is thinking about cacao or coffee systems that are grown with an overstory that's complex. For example, there's definitely been good evidence showing that the higher the pollinator populations that are supported by these complex overstories, the better the yields are in coffee systems. Additionally, the natural pest control is going to be increased the more complex your overstory is, because you're providing habitat for all of those additional bugs that are going to eat the bad bugs. And of course, the microclimate is improved for coffee and cacao in a system like this. And then, further, if we're in particular thinking about coffee or cacao in a real complex agroforestry system, we're providing fruit, we're providing timber, fuel wood, medicinal plants, etc. So there's multiple services being played by all of these different plants beyond just what our primary crop is. So the other aspect about agroforestry systems, of course, in the context of climate change, is that we're providing soil health through the the biodiversity in all the plants that are there increases the biodiversity of the soils in terms of the microorganisms that are living in those root systems. And that tends to both improve nutrient fluxes and also helps with decreasing any kind of pest diseases that may be living below ground. But of course, that also leads to an improvement in our carbon storage for the system. So when we're thinking about emissions from farming systems, we've got kind of two sides of the equation. One, we have an ability to store carbon, so we're drawing down CO2 from the atmosphere. But if we design it right, we're also going to limit the nitrous oxide emissions. And as you may know, most farming systems require nitrogen to make things grow as our fertilizer. But if we don't do a good job managing that nitrogen, you get nitrous oxide emissions, which is a very powerful greenhouse gas. But the more complexity you have in the system, the better your nitrogen, fertilizer nitrogen, stays in the system and is cycled properly, and it reduces how much nitrous oxide is leaving the system. So let me just move quickly to the second form of diversity that I was mentioning. Response diversity is this idea that when you have multiple crops, or it could be just types of within crop diversity, what you'd like to have is a distribution of crop types that respond differently to whatever happens with the climate that year. So a classic example for a farmer would be to plant both maize and millet and many other things perhaps, because maize and millet, even though they're both providing a starchy grain for household consumption, they're also not equally sensitive to drought. So you could, if the year turns out to be a little bit drier, then your millet will do better. But if you have decent rainfall, then both your maize and millet are going to do well. So you're planting that diversity as a insurance plan. But we don't have to think we can think beyond multiple crop types to think about even within a crop. You could plant 3 or 4 different maturity classes of maize, for example, because depending on how hot it is, the crops are going to mature sooner or later. Or different lettuce. There's an example here of lettuce that is heat tolerant, so that you might have some that does well if it's going to be a cool season, but if it's going to be very hot, you want some lettuce that will actually be able to handle those high temperatures. So there's more interest now in thinking about diversifying crops even within a particular crop type to take advantage of the genetics. I want to also emphasize that what we call landrace crops are really important in terms of that response diversity. So a landrace crop is the word we would use to define just locally selected crops. So farmer selected crops that are local at the village level. You might have 3 or 4 different types of maize that households in a village would utilize that have been selected by that farmer. And so we're not talking about hybrids from the seed dealer. This is locally adapted. And as you can see in the figure on the right, the landrace crops tend to have very wide genetic variation from plant to plant in comparison to the seed that you might buy from a seed dealer, when almost every crop, every plant in the field is almost genetically identical to each other. So if an extreme event comes along, you can imagine that if it's harmful to this crop on the left, all of them are going to go down. Whereas in the crop on the right, a landrace variety where there's that genetic variation, some of the plants in the field are going to do well, while others may suffer. So it gives you, you've spread your risk across slight variations in that diversity. And that genetic diversity that we're finding in locally conserved crops is key to climate adaptation. Certainly crop breeders are very much interested in understanding how much heat tolerance or drought tolerance or those kinds of traits that we can find in all of the wealth of diversity in locally adapted landrace crops. And there's very good examples where the CG centers, the Consultative Group on International Ag Research that runs the crop conservation and development centers all over the world. There are many of which are in Africa. Cardiff, for example, is one example. They've done fabulous work trying to conserve and then really redistribute the crop types that are being saved from being abandoned from that system. So my final comment here is that in order to really support rural livelihoods with respect to food security in the face of climate change, the future, I think, is really going to be dependent on embracing biodiversity and really relying on ecological principles and ecological farming systems to provide the resilience that we need to sustain that production in the face of climate change. So I appreciate any questions. You can put them in the chat. I'll stick around for a while, and thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Much thanks, Dr. Jennifer, for this amazing presentation. I really appreciate how much it's very insightful and very filled with details and innovative approach, innovative concept, and how the ecosystem services can improve the resilience of ecosystem of agroecosystem. It's so amazing, and I can see hands up, but please allow us to proceed and doing the same exercises that we have done for the last sessions. So we, with your permission, please, we can move directly to the last speaker, and then we will open the floor for QA, for QA session, So the last,
Excuse me,
but not
Jennifer. Sorry, Paul. Jennifer, are you okay? Can you wait through the next 20-minute presentation to answer
Yes,
questions?
yes, I'll
Okay.
stay. I'll be
Okay,
here.
great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you
Go
very
ahead, Paul.
much.
Sorry.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So we can move to the last presentation. Now we have Céline Delacroix, which is the director of Health Project and a senior fellow of Population Institute at the University of Ottawa in Canada. So we have we can give the floor to Céline. Yeah.
Hello, everybody. I am thrilled to be with you today, with you from Osaka in Japan, where I'm currently traveling. I understand that you'll be hearing me probably in Cameroon today on April 6th. So delighted to be there with you. Delighted to be participating as well in the Worldwide Climate and Justice Education Week, and as well as in the African Climate Justice and Education Week. And so what I want to talk to you today about is some of the recent research that I've been working on, and more broadly on a theme, which is the interconnectedness of reproductive health and rights, population dynamics, and environmental sustainability, which has, I think, of a lot of resonance for local climate solutions, and for thinking more broadly and outside of the box about how to engage for climate solutions, as well as environmental degradation more broadly. So I hope you will enjoy this talk, and please don't hesitate to contact me or reach out with any questions that you might have in relation to the study that I've done, for example, or to the FB Earth project more generally. Okay, so I'm going to be talking to you today about the synergy between population dynamics, reproductive rights, and environmental sustainability. This is really the focus of my work. Oh, I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Céline Delacroix, and I'm the director of the FB Earth project with the Population Institute. So FB Earth stands for Family Planning. And I'm also senior fellow with the Population Institute and adjunct professor at the University of Ottawa in Canada. So I'm working on the synergy between reproductive health and rights, population dynamics, and environmental sustainability. And the rationale behind this work is that by acknowledging the interrelated nature of population dynamics, reproductive rights, and environmental sustainability, we really have a unique opportunity to advance both reproductive health and rights, as well as environmental sustainability, including climate change, adaptation, and mitigation. So more specifically today, I would like to present to you the results of a study that I conducted last year on this theme. And this study focused on sub-Saharan African perspectives on this. And I conducted this study with a colleague from the University of Ghana. Before going into that study more specifically, I just want to go kind of back and present to you some key concepts that we need to keep in mind as we're discussing these issues that are very much interdisciplinary. So apologies if for some of you this is very obvious. So first, the concept of reproductive rights. Reproductive rights are well-established rights. They've been recognized for decades as a human right. So reproductive rights are human rights. But I still feel the need to reiterate that reproductive rights are human rights when I do a presentation like this. That is because reproductive rights are still largely under-acknowledged. They're underfunded, they're under threat, but they're very much under-acknowledged as a category of human rights. So well-established reproductive rights recognize that individuals and couples must have the information and the means to decide freely the number, the spacing, and the timing of their children. The issues that are related to reproductive rights are some of the most vigorously contested rights issues worldwide, regardless of population's socio-economic level, culture, or religion, regardless of geographical area. These are issues that are very much related to our privacy, our intimate lives, and that also reflect very much the social norms and values of the societies and communities in which we live. So for these reasons, reproductive rights continue to be very much fraught and contested globally. So reproductive rights include the right to reproductive self-determination, of course, the right to sexual and reproductive health services, but also the right to information and education on these issues, and the right to equality and non-discrimination. So in this sense, all the conditions that would constrain a person's ability to make full, free, informed choices violate reproductive rights. And overall progress for there has been significant progress, especially in the last decades, for reproductive rights globally, with some statistics improving. But overall, it can still be said that progress is much too slow, and that this category of rights really remains under threat. So a few key statistics help us understand the scale of the work that still remains to be done on reproductive rights. The first one is the fact that approximately half of all pregnancies are still unintended today. So that's about 120 million every year. Another key statistic is 257 million, and that refers to the number of those who want to avoid a pregnancy and who are not using safe, modern methods of contraception. So now going back to the environmental sustainability component of the equation, while it's well known and well documented that a healthy environment contributes to reproductive health and rights, the reverse is also true, but it's much less celebrated. And that is that by advancing reproductive health and rights, we benefit indirectly environmental sustainability. And when I say environmental sustainability, again, I include climate change. So there is ample evidence that global population size influences environmental sustainability and drives climate change. The sixth assessment report of the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, identified population growth and gross domestic product as the strongest drivers of CO2 emissions. in 2010, a group of researchers, experts, including Brian O'Neill, calculated that slowing population growth to the low UN variant projections, so the projections for future population growth, could provide between 16 and 29% of the emissions reductions necessary to avoid dangerous climate change. Also, there's been thousands of scientists around the world who have endorsed a world warning of climate emergency, and who stressed in this the need to not only reduce overconsumption and waste, but also to stabilize and gradually reduce the human population by advancing gender equity and human rights. So the emergence of climate change and environmental degradation as policy issues that really need the world's attention have reinforced the importance of reproductive health and rights and population dynamics. And while these environmental crises are an existential threat for all of us, they represent a crisis of inequity, as some population groups are disproportionately vulnerable to its impacts. And I'm not even mentioning here the fact that the responsibility aspect of some population groups who haven't contributed so much, but in terms of vulnerability alone, this is very much a crisis of inequity. So just a little overlook on population numbers. We've gone from a population about 1.6 billion humans in 1900 to 8 billion in 2022. And according to the United Nations World Population Prospects, the global population is projected to grow to 9.7 billion in 2050 and to peak at around 10.4 billion in 2086. So we are on a pathway to potentially adding another 2.4 billion human beings by the year 2086. So this number, 2.4 billion human beings, is comparable to the whole population, the global population in the 1950s, just to put that in perspective. And while the global population size is still increasing, the rate of population growth is decreasing. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. And growth will be driven by high levels of fertility in some parts of the world, and that's especially true of sub-Saharan Africa, which is projected to become the most populous nation in the future, with a population that could grow from 1.15 billion in 2022 to 3.44 billion by the end of this century. So while the population is still growing, the world is becoming increasingly demographically polarized, as some parts of the world are starting to see or are seeing marked population decline. I'm currently in Japan. This is one of the places where the decline in population is really starting to be visible. So there is this different stories happening in different parts of the world. What is certain is that the highest population growths are projected to disproportionately take place in low-income countries, countries that tend to have a high vulnerability and exposure to the negative impacts of environmental degradation. So this is again a crisis of inequity. So I worked with Dr. Nkechi Owu from the University of Ghana on a research project that aimed to explore the perspectives of sub-Saharan African actors on these issues, on the interconnectedness of reproductive rights, population dynamics, and environmental sustainability. And there's many reasons why we chose to focus on sub-Saharan Africa. In short, I would say that the main reason was that the sub-Saharan African voices on these issues were uniquely relevant. They are uniquely relevant for a number of reasons. The first one being what I just mentioned, that Africa's demographic trajectory is really quite unique and an exception globally today, as it's growing 3 times faster than the rest of the world. It has an average of 4.6 births per woman in 2021. I am a resident of Canada. I currently live in Canada, and the fertility rate in Canada, by comparison, is 1.3 births per woman in 2022. Also, the population of Africa has increased 6-fold from 1950 until 2022. And this brings, of course, a number of challenges, massive socioeconomic challenges for sectors such as health, infrastructure, education, etc. And so, as sub-Saharan Africa is projected to continue to be the fastest growing region in the world, these challenges are likely to be exacerbated. The demography of Africa, of sub-Saharan Africa, made justified our reason for making this research project, but also the fact that there are other factors, such as the fact that this is the place in the world with the highest proportion of both unintended pregnancies and unmet need for family planning. It's also where a part of the world that is disproportionately vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. So our study, we undertook it last year in 2023, 2022 and 2023, sorry. We basically conducted a survey and in-depth interviews, followed by in-depth interviews with participants from all over sub-Saharan Africa. We had 402 respondents to the survey and 18 participants in the follow-up interviews. We had participants from all over sub-Saharan Africa, but as you'll see in the participant characteristics here, we cannot do any claims of representativeness for the results of our study because the number was really low. I mean, 400 participants for the sub-Saharan African continent is really too low. And also, most participants came from Ethiopia. We had 50% of participants who were from Ethiopia. We also had a strong gender imbalance. Most participants identified as men. In terms of professional fields, we basically reached out to participants in different professional fields. We purposefully sourced them from listservs, professional networks, organizations, and word-of-mouth communications, etc. And our respondents mostly came from the health, the environment, and the sexual and reproductive health sectors. Sorry. To be included in the survey, participants had to be a national or holding permanent residence in a country located in sub-Saharan Africa, and they had to self-identify as working or as being active in a field that is related to economic, social, or environmental development. So yes, I think I'm going to pass this because I'll be short on time. Okay, so the findings and the results of the survey. Really, this survey and this study more broadly echoed previous studies that were conducted on population growth and concern for population growth. And really, the first thing that we noticed was that there appeared to be very broad-ranging concern for environmental degradation and the link with population growth. So our results really reflect the concerns associated with the need to acknowledge the role of excessive consumption, global inequities, and to center reproductive autonomy and human rights in discussions of population dynamics. But they also overwhelmingly point towards a non-binary and a more holistic outlook, one where the disproportionate role of consumption and production, which is associated with the global north, does not preclude acknowledging the role of population growth, which is associated with the global south, as a driver of environmental degradation. So here I have a quote that I thought I'd read to you today from a participant in South Africa who stated that the cumulative impact of 1 billion low per capita footprints still equals a high impact. This is not to discuss the high impact of people that may have lower fertility rates and higher per capita footprints, who are as important to address. So the importance of addressing both aspects conjunctively, not to isolate population dynamics and population growth as a solution for environmental degradation, was reiterated and made explicit by participants. But this did not prevent them from finding that population growth was an issue of concern for not only for environmental reasons, but also for social and economic ones. So there was a lot of discussions around these issues. Most respondents were supportive of messages and policies that stress the positive impact of family planning on environmental sustainability. And they agreed for the large majority that integrating family planning as a component of environmental policies would contribute to accelerating progress for reproductive health and rights. Participants also stressed that responses to environmental degradation and climate change must integrate population dynamics as a central and a transversal component. There was really this insistence on the fact that this was an issue that was transversal, that had implications across a whole range of issues, and that it needed to be reflected. We also found broad support for the integration of population dynamics and reproductive health and rights dimensions at international environmental meetings and in international environmental sustainability instruments. So just to contextualize that a little bit, I attended the COP Conference of the Parties, the COP on Biodiversity in Montreal in 2022, I believe. And some of the participants were interviewed there. And so part of the questions that I asked was whether they felt that population dynamics and reproductive health and rights should be discussed in these types of forums. And the response was really very much positive. And not only from the participants that I interviewed on in these meetings, but also this was also shown in the survey. Another finding that came up was that sub-Saharan Africans did not feel well represented or sufficiently heard in international environmental governance. And this again was highlighted by some of the conversations that I had with participants at these events. So overall, the disproportionate role of the Global North in generating environmental impacts was acknowledged by participants. But the importance of population size, population growth for a broad range of societal issues was also stressed. So I have tables and a whole lot of additional information in relation to this study if you're interested to learn more or to delve deeper into this topic. Please don't hesitate to contact me. I hope that you've enjoyed this presentation, and I wish you an excellent day. Bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Céline Delacroix. Hope your participants you enjoyed this last presentation from our speakers. We just record it from Osaka in Japan. And don't worry about the presentation. I can see in the chat box many of you are asking about the presentation slides. We are going to share it with you. Yeah, with your certificates, of course, your certificate of participation. Yeah, and now we can finally open the last session, the last QA session. Yeah, and over to you, dear participant. If you have any questions, any comment and suggestion, please kindly raise your hand up, and we will give you the floor. I can see Veronique Nyem, the first hand. Before I give you the floor, Veronique, yeah, I just want to take a few seconds to thank more Dr. Jennifer and Céline for your presence upon us, and yeah, and don't hesitate, dear participant. If you have any question even after
It looks like there may be a problem with Paul's internet. So, Veronique, would you like to unmute and ask your question?
Hello, can you hear me?
Now we can. You
Okay.
were interrupted for a moment.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so sorry. You know you are facing an electricity issue here. So yeah, so I'm so sorry about it. So my Wi-Fi just shut down due to electricity. Yeah, we have Veronique. Veronique, you raise your hand up. Can you take the floor and ask your question?
She's in Cameroon as well. Maybe her internet went down too.
Yeah, I can see
Okay.
it.
So good evening, everybody. I am Veronique Nyem, a member of RAED in Cameroon. So it is a great pleasure for me to attend to this webinar. Sorry, I'm a Francophone, so my English is not very, very good. I want just to thank especially Jennifer for her relevant presentation. So my intervention will not be a question, but a complement of information for her presentation. I want to say that here in Central Africa, particularly in Cameroon, our local three sisters are to respond to diversity are maize, groundnut, and beans. So our parents, we today children, and in our educational sensibilization, educational activity or for environmental, we use to give to our children those three sisters. I said maize, groundnut, and beans. The role of the beans will be after the moving the two other sisters, that mean groundnut and maize. The role of the beans will be to restore the soil so that even the next year we can even plant in the same parcel of ground. So thank you. That is why my small contribution for with the experience of Cameroon in Central Africa. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Great to hear that there's a Three Sisters version in Cameroon as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Veronique. Do we have any more question? Okay. Okay. So if you don't have any more question, I think now we're going to move to the closing remarks. Yeah, Kwame.
Yeah, but I want to know that if you can have the PowerPoint of Veronica presentation.
Sorry, can you repeat yourself?
I say that I want to know that if you can have the PowerPoint of Veronica presentation. Do you hear me?
Yeah, I think I can hear you. I was saying that don't worry about it. We are going to forward all the presentation to you guys. Okay. Now we are moving to the end of this regional workshop. Yeah, I just want to take the floor once more to congratulate you, to congratulate everyone which attending here, because you are the one who made it possible. We are moving now to the closing remarks, so I will give the floor to Dr. David, yeah, for his closing remarks, and then I will take the floor after him. So in the chat box, you are going to see the link, yeah, the link for the certificate from, yes, if you need the certificate of participation, you only need to fill the form out, yeah, with your details, and we will provide the certificate to you. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Oh, okay. So, Dr. David, the floor is yours for your closing remark.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Paul, and everybody. We've had, I think, I don't know how many people have come and gone. We've had as many as 50 of us at one time. We've had some four excellent presentations on complementary topics about community participatory projects, about the essential role of solar and other kinds of clean energy, and especially the connection between using solar energy to help to support the emerging healthcare sector, especially in rural areas of Africa. We had a presentation by Dr. Phillips, reminding really about the traditional ways that agriculture has practiced, and time to go back to those ways, and rather than the failed technological approaches of the past decades. And then finally, the presentation by Dr. Delacroix on the connections between reproductive rights and population impacts on sustainability. As Paul has said, that if you are registered for this conference, that you will be getting links and copies of these presentations. And so you'll have an opportunity to both review them and share them. I'll also say that I'm very impressed with the questions and the participation by everybody in the chat. I also want to mention that if you're not completely exhausted about conferences that about climate justice and injustice in Africa, that there'll be another such conference beginning in about 30 minutes by a private group called Africa Environmental Watch. And we will be participating, at least I, and I think Paul as well, participating in that. You're welcome to join that from the link in the chat, or email me and I can send you the invitation directly. So, Kieran, why don't you present our closing video now, and then we can turn it to Paul for his final remarks. But again, just to remind you that this is one of many conferences and classes that are ongoing, not only this past week, but throughout Earth Month and beyond. And we support you. We want to be working with you, and we look forward to continuing to work with each of you.
Economics, literature, math, engineering, history, music.
What meaning do they hold if our climate swallows us whole?
I can be courageous.
I can be courageous.
I can be courageous.
I can use my voice and passion, keep fighting even on the days it feels hopeless.
Hello.
I can fight for my people.
I can hold on to the beauty we still have.
I can save our
Hello.
land against this man-made havoc.
I can be a voice for the sky, the soil, and the sea.
I can make a good future for our next generation.
I can stand up, even when it feels easier to sit down.
I can love my brothers and sisters and protect their lives, because we have the same mother, the great Mother Earth.
I can be louder than polluters that try to silence life.
I can do my part and lift others around me to do better.
You are joining tens of thousands of students at hundreds of schools across the planet in learning and thinking about the work each of you can do, now and in your future, to repair the climate and lead a just transition to a clean energy future.
Paula, are you able to unmute your image? I'm not sure whether we have you with us or not.
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Attorney Karish. Yeah. Yeah, okay. So fair. So as my closing remark, I just want to say thanks to the Almighty God first, which will allow us to be connected here and implement this project. And then I will I want to take the floor to also thanks the Bat College. I think the Bat College through Dr. David and Dr. Hiban, yes, which help us to implement this initiative here in Africa. And it's a good partnership, it's a good partnership, and for the next year we are going to do greater things together. And also want to take the floor to thanks all our relevant speaker, APIC network, the University of Ottawa with Dr. Dan, with Dr. Jennifer, Dr. Celine, Dr. Regina. What amazing speaker we got here for this regional workshop. I just want also to take the floor to thank you, dear participant. Thank you very much for your presence. Thank you very much for your participation. Thank you very much for your questions. Thank you very much for your comments. So you made this workshop. Yeah. So you know, this is the end of the regional workshop on climate justice and education, but it's not the end of our battle for climate justice and education. So why saying this? I invite you, dear participant, if you are from Togo, Kenya, GRC, Mali, Benin, we are going to have national events, national justice, national climate justice and education events in these countries where we are represented. So feel free to reach out to us in case you want to involve more with African Environmental Network. We are open for membership. We are open for collaboration. We are open to you all. Do follow us also on our social media, LinkedIn and Facebook. Just type African Environmental Network and follow us for more information and upcoming activities about us. So a quick reminder that we are going to upcoming days to organize the national climate justice and education in Benin, Mali, Kenya, Togo. If you want to involve, just reach out to us. And if you want to organize such events in your own country, just reach out to either Dr. David and I. Yeah, we can facilitate the implementation of such events in your country. So thanks once more for joining us. It was a good pleasure. So have a nice day, a nice weekend. Enjoy your week. As I said, this is the end of our climate justice and education regional workshop, but it's not the end of our battle for climate justice and education. Yeah. So take care. Thank you very much. Thanks for joining. Have a nice week. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Oh, please, can we have a link to the Telegram or WhatsApp group, please? To the African Environmental Network.
Yeah, we will share all the relevant links by email. Yeah, by
Okay.
email. Yes.
Oh, thank you
Yes.
so much, sir. Thank
Yes.
you.
Yes. Please fill out the form. Yes, the form for your certificate. Yeah, because while
Okay.
receiving your certificate, you will receive also all the relevant links. Yeah.
Oh, that's perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay. You're welcome. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Carrie Ann. I think you can stop the recording now.